Welcome to Blizzard and Bloom, the podcast where we navigate the storms and celebrate the triumphs in business and entrepreneurship. Join us as we dive into stories, insights, and strategies from top professionals to help you thrive in today's evolving landscape. And now, here is your host, Jay Rotinelli.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Blizzard and Bloom. Last episode, we had one of the senior vice presidents of SiteOne, Greg Thistle, joined us and shared a lot of insight on the industry at large and kind of as a whole and what he sees in the future for us. So that was a great episode. Today, lucky enough to have a great colleague and what I would consider a friend in the industry. Josh Flynn, who I've got to know over the past several years. So without further ado, welcome, Josh. Thanks for taking some time today to join us on the cast and just give us a little bit of background of kind of who you are and what roles you fill in your position.
Hey, Jay. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, in a little bit of my background, so I'm currently the CEO of Power Equipment Plus. We are a 6-location outdoor power equipment dealer on Long Island. So we kind of stretch all the way out from East Hampton, pretty close to Queens. I've been down here doing this for a little over 2 years, since January of 2023. Prior to that, I was in commercial landscaping for 6 or 7 years, so I had a lot of exposure to the industry that way. And now I like to think of it as I've transitioned from buying and breaking to selling and fixing.
Gotcha. Nice. It's been cool to see kind of your career path and I mean, never mind what you're doing down at Power Equipment Plus, but I'm sure there's some challenges that come with being on that side of the industry and providing the tools and resources. So, what would you kind of give us a little bit of what your path was is when you came to lead the ship at Power Equipment Plus?
Yeah, so if we kind of track back all the way to my beginnings in commercial landscape, I started as a field supervisor, worked my way up to the CEO of a company that's based in Portland, Maine. Spent, like I said, about 6 years there, but got to touch kind of every part of the organization, manage the equipment at some point, all that kind of jazz. And then this opportunity arose to come down to Power Equipment Plus and run this. Originally, we started with 3 locations in East Hampton, Southampton, and Mattituck. Sort of upon arrival, like the team in place was pretty tremendous. And I saw my job as kind of, we needed to upgrade the software systems. We needed to kind of position everybody, get everybody where they were, their best fit within the organization. And then almost immediately there were a bunch of opportunities for growth. So, one of the statistics that's always in my mind, for us, because we're looking to, grow the business, acquire maybe some other smaller power equipment dealers. The vast majority of outdoor power equipment dealers are well within retirement age, or getting quite close. And unfortunately, a lot of them don't have good succession plans. So we were able to acquire an additional location in East Meadow, New York in the fall of 23. So that was our 4th. And then we were able to acquire another one in Bayshore, New York last fall. So that was our 5th. And then we decided that there was an opportunity in the Riverhead market for us long-term. And without good acquisition prospects, we decided to kind of open up our own location. So it's the first time we've tried to just open one up from scratch. Revitalized an old industrial building, moved some current staff that we had who was prepared for, a step up in their career. And we've had that open in Riverhead since the second week of March.
That's great.
Yeah, now we find ourselves with 6 spots kind of covering all of Long Island. And that's kind of been one of the trends within the industry is a lot of these smaller locations are either retiring or you have to be of a certain size now to be able to manage the inventory and work with the manufacturers and all that other kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's kind of where we sit today. Our primary lines, we focus only on outdoor power equipment. So we don't sell small tractor. We don't sell power sports. with our primary lines being Walker, Toro, Skag, and Wright, with a little bit of Exmark mixed in. And then on the 2-cycle side, Steel, Co, and Redbacks.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yeah, we also,
Cool.
so obviously with an outdoor power equipment dealer, sales, parts sales, service, and then we also do a fair amount of rental. So we rent a lot of the things that we also sell. The Toro Dingo line being one of those. So
Gotcha.
yeah, we kind of try to
Wow.
be a bit of a one-stop shop for everybody.
Yeah. So one of the things I was thinking about that, a lot of the folks have been discussing is the mergers and acquisitions, right? It seems that's pretty common now. I guess really in the U.S. business marketplace as a whole, but we were even talking trades a few episodes ago and how some of the older folks are getting out of the trades and there's not enough younger folks come in. And I think about some of the businesses. And to your point, maybe lack of succession plans. Either they don't have anybody in the family to hand the business down to, or they're just not sure which way they're going with it. What It's interesting to see how your success has evolved, just with the expansion of stores. What are some of the challenges that come into play when you're dealing with some of these mergers and acquisitions and taking over these companies?
Yeah, so in terms of like things that are challenges but are probably more easily fixed, software tends to be one of them, and just systems and operations. It's still a very paper heavy type of industry. Lots of clipboards. I'm aware of a fairly large, 7-figure dealer on the island that just doesn't use computers. I don't know how that's
Hmm.
possible, but they do.
Hmm.
Um, and with that comes the challenges of like inventory management, work order management, sales history. How do you determine what you're going to buy, all that kind of stuff. So at each of the acquisitions that we've done, we've upgraded the software systems. We currently use Ideal, which fills pretty much all of our desires in terms of what we need from a dealer management system. um, and then we also tend to be able to bring in different lines. So choosing what you're going to sell is a pretty big challenge as you acquire another location. Maybe they're the only ones who sell that particular product, and you're like, yeah, like I don't know if I really want to get into that super heavy. One of the dealerships we bought recently was selling Polaris as a line, and we opted not to purchase it just because it was going to confuse everything. So some of those decisions. Um, I would say, obviously, employees is both a challenge and also, can be the greatest benefit to acquiring another location.
Sure. Sure.
Um, we've had situations where we purchased a location and it was just 2 technicians and the owner, and it was like, okay, how do we fill out this front counter staff? Um, and then we've had other situations where the majority of the time, like the staff on hand is great and ready to go. We tend to do things a little bit differently where we have, I would say, more qualified, more tenured folks, but fewer of them at the counter. Where you'll see a lot of dealerships, maybe they have 6 or 7 people, but combined, they don't sort of have I would say, the acumen of 2 or 3 of our folks.
Gotcha.
Um,
Sure. Sure.
we work really hard on training and finding the right folks. I've sought out a few people who weren't in the business at the time when we acquired it, and was like, hey, I really think you need to come back and check this out again. We'd love to work with you again. So people is always a challenge, but also like just a rewarding challenge when it works out. Um, and yeah, like inventory management can be a big thing. You walk into a store that you're hoping to acquire, and all of a sudden they've got hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of stuff that they haven't sold in 2 or 3 years, and you go through the process like, all right, how am I going to move this, how am I going to handle this? And that's just a different challenge as well. But at scale now, we do have the opportunity where, like, oh, one of my stores has only ever sold that piece or equipment in 2 years, but it happens to crop up at one of the locations randomly, and it's like, all right, let's just grab that and move that over there. So
Yeah.
that does give us an advantage to be really flexible in our inventory.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's same challenge as a lot of other businesses, right? Like people is always a challenge. Inventory management, new vendors, and then customers.
Hmm.
So Long Island is a big place. There's a lot of people here. There's some customer crossover. Um, we try to keep the dealerships at least 30 minutes apart, and we use minutes on Long Island, not miles, because it just
Yeah.
doesn't apply.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure. For sure.
so yeah, you're introducing yourself as a new entity to new customers, and even if none of the people at the dealership change, if the name changes or they think there's a lot of times these businesses are very tied to the owner themselves.
Right. Right.
So that's a challenge to overcome and introduce yourself and make sure they understand where you're coming from and you intend on doing business, the way that it was been done and improving it for the customer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, that's great. We talk a lot about, and I know you're big on this, is um, relationships, right? We talk about. I know in our industry with the landscape, like very seldom is it transactional business. It's mostly relational.
Mhm.
So how does that look from a power equipment standpoint? Do you find that you're in relational sales often, and you have certain contractors using equipment, and they come back to you all the time, or is it more transactional? Um,
It is very much relationship based,
yeah.
and
Okay.
again, like this is not about me. Like it is very much about the technicians and the folks at the counter and their relationship with their customers that they're going to see every other day. Um, we have folks that have been coming to us for 20, 30 plus years.
Wow.
And again, how you retain those customers is like living up to your commitment to them. And some of the commitments, one of the, I guess the ethos of or a mantra that we have is that our goal is to get equipment and parts into our customers' hands as quickly and accurately as possible. So we try to make every decision based on that. That means if I have to drive all the way from one end of the island to another one to get a customer the part they're looking for because their machine's down, I'm probably going to do it.
Yeah.
If that means we have to special order something, we have to get it here as quickly as possible, we're going to do it. That also means having, appropriate levels of staffing, the right systems and operations to move work through the back of the shop. So much of this is service related. Like you can buy a lot of these mowers from other people, but if you don't have the confidence that you can bring it back to that location to fix it, then what's that relationship really worth to you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And one of the things that we try to focus on too is, our success is very much dependent on our customer success. So if they are up and running, like I would say from a purely financial or business perspective, be like, oh, cool. Like their machines are breaking. Like that means I have the opportunity to fix it. Where we try to think of it as like, it's all about uptime coming from landscaping. Like the most important thing is that your machines and your people are there and they
Yeah.
have
Working.
their job. They're working.
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
that's not happening and our customers aren't successful and retaining their customers, they're not going to have the funds to come back and buy stuff from us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we
Well
focus a
said.
lot on uptime and getting customers in and out, improving the, turnaround time in the shop, special order parts, and then also just focusing really heavily on our data, making sure that we're stocking the right parts at all times. We try to meet or exceed a 90% fill rate, which we've had pretty good success doing. And it just, you don't want your customers disappointed. There are certain things that must always be in our shop. Like if a customer ever walks into one of our stores and we don't have a set of Walker blades, we have failed.
Yeah.
We don't have a Kawasaki filter, like we've failed. And we're just not going to let that happen.
Yeah. So it comes a point where you and your team know the clients and their needs, and then to your point, right? Like if they're not up and running, then that doesn't bode well for you, right? So that's what I think when you talk about channel partnerships, and I know us here at Piscataqua, when we look for dealers and vendors, and whether it's power equipment or hardscape products, it's all about the relationship and the value that it brings, not the price, but the
Exactly.
value, right? So I see some folks and some smaller contractors and buying some equipment at the box stores and things like that, and I think to myself, boy, what are you going to do when that breaks, and how are you going to get that fixed, right? But I know for me, even on a personal level, I value the service. And I have a few small pieces of equipment, and I know that my local dealer can take care of me. And if he doesn't have that part that day, he works hard to make sure he gets it. So to me, that's a win-win situation in good
Those
business.
relationships too go like so much deeper than just like power equipment. They're like also very personal. A lot of folks come
Yeah.
into one of our locations, and there's a good chance that the person behind the counter, like, knows your kids' names, like knows you have a dog, and sometimes it's like knows you're going through a tough time. And, I hear the conversations that are happening, and it's not about dollars and cents. It's how are you doing? How's work? What can we do for you?
Yeah.
And it means a lot. They trust us. Like they trust us. A lot of their business success is dependent on whether or not we can deliver for them. And if they trust the people at the counter, they're just that much more likely to come back.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me kind of go down a different route here. As far as power equipment goes, the latest, and I'm sure you're seeing it and hearing the demand for it, but battery operated equipment. Um, what does that sector look like, and do you see that continuing to grow? And what are some of the challenges with that? I know it's kind of it's kind of a bigger animal, but
Yeah.
just curious with some of your input on the battery stuff.
So I think, for us, we're in a unique situation because some of our locations are in and around towns that have restrictions on certain types of gas powered products, right? It's not California,
Gotcha.
but some towns have bans on gas powered blowers from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Some of them, like the town of Southampton, has it year round. So it just presents a challenge to our customers. I would say that on the eastern half of Long Island, there's a very high battery adoption, whereas on the western side, where there's not quite as many restrictions and just a different type of clientele for us and different clientele for our customers, not as high of an adoption rate. I would say from an opinion standpoint of in terms of cost and value and what we recommend to our customers is at this point, homeowners like probably shouldn't be purchasing gas equipment. The stuff that they need to work on at their homes, battery fits the bill in pretty much every category except blowers and larger commercial mowers. On the larger commercial mower side, it's not necessarily because of the runtime, it's because of the cost.
Yeah.
You're still looking at a zero turn that's going to be in the mid to high 20s, and that's minimum. Some of these other ones can get up into the 30s and sometimes 40s. Manufacturers all kind of pushed out their model and their version. To be completely frank, like none of them have really taken off super well because, and some of that's government. The incentives have come and they've gone, and then they've come back and then they've gone again. So it gets a little bit confusing, and then we're not able to give the right information to our customers. I don't think that even stuff like interest rates, like all this stuff kind of hits at a weird time where sure, you want to buy a $30,000 lawnmower that will have a return because of, no gas, very few wear parts in terms of, filters and all this other kind of stuff, oils. But there's a timeline for that until you see that return. And if they're going to pay 8% or whatever on a mower, like now's not the right time. But when you look at it from a 2-cycle perspective, in our opinion, battery for string trimmers, hedge trimmers, all those types of things, everything except the backpack blower, for commercial contractors have what they need. It's a little bit more expensive up front, but then again, from a power equipment dealer perspective, I'm probably never going to see that machine again. There's nothing to fix. We joke that there's like 2 things that keep us in business: bad fuel and people dropping stuff. And bad fuel being like 75% of the problem, right? So if it's battery, you don't run into that. But the blowers just present such a hill to climb. We have manufacturers coming out with models that have the power, but not the runtime. And then you have some that maybe have a decent amount of runtime, but not the power. And then you're talking about just exorbitant cost. I think we're at a little bit of a stall, if I'm being frank. I think right now the innovation is more on like how many more tools can we add a battery to, as opposed to how are we improving the efficiency of the tools that we already have. And I think the hang up is in the battery itself. How much power and how much runtime can you smack into this small little vessel, particularly for backpack blowers. And on the mower side, it's just the cost of those batteries. You're looking at $5,000 to $8,000, sometimes $10,000 just for the battery cell component itself. They're extremely heavy. which, having been in Maine, like you guys have been getting a lot of rain, like you can't put a 2,000-pound machine on a lawn. It's going to destroy it. It's a shame because like there are applications. We're seeing municipalities have a lot of adoption, wide open fields, large properties, like that stuff fits. The electric zero turns will be fine for that. But until that price point gets a little bit closer and you get a little bit of adoption and it kind of seeds itself into the landscape, folks pay attention to what other folks are doing. And we haven't seen that tipping point where, someone's bought a couple of them and then all of a sudden they've, told everybody how amazing they are. And now people are buying them.
It's interesting because I hear what you're saying too. Like it seems like the trend has been how many more tools can we get that are battery powered, right? But then we think about this whole battery powered thing. And I think about the infrastructure that's needed to support these when the teams are out and about, right? And you think about a box truck setup and, okay, then at that point, now you've got to put solar panels or whatever it might be. And so it's not just the power equipment alone. It's all the other, subsequential things that support it, right? The chargers and the other components and additional batteries. And so I know that can be cost prohibitive to certainly some of the smaller outfits.
Yeah, that's where a company like, I think Crest has like an interesting offering. It's the sticker shock, right?
Yeah.
$10,000 to put that thing, that basically large power cell in the back of a truck is a lot for even as a startup for these guys.
Yeah.
And I think the other charging solutions, Milwaukee has like a portable battery generator that might have some application there. I think solar panels is definitely like an interesting model, but it doesn't charge them fast enough.
Yeah.
So you're really looking at a situation where like you just got to load yourself up with a bunch of batteries that charged overnight and then hope that it makes you through the day.
Hope that you can get through. Yeah. Yep. That's tough. That's tough when you're talking production.
Yep.
So talk about maybe some of the industry challenges that maybe you might be seeing across the country, such as emissions and standardizations and things of that. I mean, are you seeing much in the way of that? And if so, how do you keep up with it? And how does it relay down to the end consumer or contractor?
I would, outside of the battery and it being a noise versus emissions versus pollution, whatever you want to call it. Outside of that, there's not too much. A lot of those restrictions are set to California, which is interesting because some of the manufacturers have to sell like a California model of the same mower that we can purchase here in New York. And when these types of pieces of legislation come up, I'd say the biggest challenge is where it's town by town.
Yeah.
So you're having landscapers who are trying to work within zip codes that are right next to each other that have wildly different expectations about how they're supposed to operate.
Interesting.
And then that's also puts the onus on us of like, hey, do you know what the restrictions are in this town versus that town versus that town? And it's just, it can be difficult to even keep up with.
Yeah.
And it's blowers. Like blowers is the big one. We've seen a little talk about mowers. I think you're going to get significantly more pushback just because of the cost. I know the state of New York is looking into a rebate program for folks who want to transition to battery, which I think is one of the better ways to approach it. More carrot, less stick. But California gets to kind of do its own thing with its relationship with the EPA. The state of New York, like there's a bill in committee for, restricting the use of gasoline powered, like any small equipment. It's not going to go anywhere because you're just not going to get enough adoption statewide. So for us, really, it's the biggest challenge is keeping up with where and when these things are happening. Because unfortunately, as my experience was in landscaping as well, these things aren't well announced. They're not, all these meetings are not well advertised. And in turn, then they are not well participated in by landscapers and the people who use the equipment. So there tends to not be wonderful representation. My opinion is just making sure that everybody has the best information possible to make the best decisions. So that's the biggest challenge is just how quickly things can change, where they're changing, and that it's just not uniform anywhere.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. And sometimes they're tucking these bills in amongst other things. And 100%. To your point, you're not really seeing them. So kind of one of my final pieces. We talk, the economy's on everybody's minds and the skepticism and where things are going. Has that affected your business, power equipment, and if so, in what ways might it be? And what's maybe some good advice for some folks out there that on a contractor level that are maybe skeptical about future purchases or and how long they're keeping their equipment and so forth?
Yep. We definitely, it's weird, right? Because we're going to be busy in spring almost no matter what. It's more the concern for once the initial push is over, how many more sort of, I don't want to call them discretionary, but like additional purchases are these contractors going to make? And for reference for our company, we're about 75% commercial across our 6 locations.
Okay.
Sales. So on the consumer side, a little bit not quite as impactful, but still would have an impact. Again, it falls in the same category. It's like it's just trying to keep up with what's going on. So what we've seen so far is Toro and Exmark have initiated surcharges on all of their machines, and their parts. We have seen other companies go in the exact opposite direction. Skag and Wright have actually leaned into the current pricing structures that they have, and guaranteeing no increases. To my current knowledge, again, this could change next week.
Sure.
And then Walker, same deal, like no increases. It really depends on the manufacturer and what you're dealing with and where they source their parts and where they build everything and whether it's assembled here or if it's actually manufactured in the United States. And again, that varies wildly from manufacturer to manufacturer. We're not seeing like a lot of pushback of customers coming in and being like, I'm not buying that because of XYZ. But the prices are going to dictate that. So, Toro and Exmark prices are going to go up. We'll see what happens with the other brands. For us, it's just keeping up with the pricing in our systems, with our staff, all of our, all the way that we present the equipment in the showrooms. I would say, and parts is because we get parts from different manufacturers for the engines and Kawasaki and Kohler and Briggs and don't tend to not see the price increases with them as easily. We get uploaded price files, but it can tend to change without much notice. And incrementally, right? Like we're not talking about stuff going from $10 to $25. We're going like 10 to 12, but that can creep on you over time. So for us, it's just trying to pay attention and keep up with every single little notice that's coming in. Apparently, I wasn't involved in this during COVID, but like this is it's reminiscent a little bit of just like, hey, all of a sudden the price increases. And what we haven't seen yet, but I'm anticipating is going to happen is not necessarily price increases, but availability issues. So, sort of the word and, I would say globally and for the United States in particular with China of like how much is getting shipped over here and how many containers are missing. When and where are we going to see that impact? And then what's interesting is how are we going to see that impact on the back end? So say everything goes back to normal and there's a flood of shipments, all of a sudden all those shipments with the speed of which people wanted to get to the United States, all those containers actually end up costing a lot more. So then prices can go up again. And unfortunately, I don't know that prices ever really come down once they come. And that's a whole other topic that we could spend 4 hours discussing that we don't need to do
for sure.
But it's just keeping up with everything. I would say my best advice is if you're on the fence, now is a better time to purchase like larger stuff. Don't fret about some of the smaller things, and not so much because of the price of the unit. But interest rates right now are about as good as they've been in the last 2 or 3 years. Okay. And when manufacturers get fearful of whether or not sales are going to be where they need to be, they go to financing first. They might do some promos, but they tend to drop the financing first because they can buy points from the bank. And all of a sudden you start seeing 0% or 1.99 or 2.99. I would say the majority of our customers right now, somewhere around 3.99 for 36 months. Not bad. Way better than a car. And, where this time last year and even the year before, you were probably closer to 5, maybe 6.
Gotcha.
So I would say it's less so about like, oh, is that machine going to be available, or is it going to be $10,000 more? Like, sure, some of them might go up, but you're going to see like $400 or $500 increases on a $10,000 unit, something like that, maybe. I think where the bigger concern is, and the thing that's significantly out of our control is like, how does all the financial markets and all that kind of jazz and the Fed and all those different movements, how is that going to affect their ability to finance equipment when they want to purchase it? That's I would say that maybe not what everybody is thinking about. They're much more concerned with the sticker price, but the financing will catch you way worse than the sticker price. And I think, and then availability, like they've manufactured most of everything for this year. We probably wouldn't see significant equipment problems until next year, maybe some random parts and stuff, but I don't see that as being the issue. It's more on the financing side, I think, than anything.
Yeah. Well, good. I appreciate that tidbit of information. And, I think it goes back to, you hit on some really good points today. I think, relationships are huge. I mean, they're big for everybody, right? Not only from your side, but I think from the end user on a contractor level. Because if you have a really good partnership, they're going to take care of you on both sides of things, right? So, I think that brings a ton of value to that relationship and that partnership. So, but if there's something that you think that could kind of catch us off guard, would you say it's going to be more, and maybe you hit on it already, but it sounds like maybe the overbuilds or to your point, the push of getting equipment here, down the road, and now we're going to have all these containers of equipment. Outside of that, do you see anything else that that really could trigger something out of the norm?
I mean, I feel like we covered, from a tariffs perspective, financing, availability of equipment. I mean, if anything, with the current administration, like, you're not going to see more restriction on gas power. You're probably going to have us going in some of the. So that's probably not much to worry about right now.
Good.
Just like the general just economic state, right? Like, our customers, have customers who are, if their disposable income starts to dry up, like that can create a challenge.
Sure.
So it's just, I don't necessarily know how you battle that. I feel like it can crop up, pretty quick, as we've seen, and it can also be long and drawn out. So it's just doing a lot of little things, right? Taking care of your equipment, like bring it in for service. Make sure you're hitting all of your intervals, protecting your investments, protect your employees, continue to build those relationships with your customers. And, for us, one of the things that we've done, on the uptime side and just trying to build those relationships is, we've started offering, free preventative maintenance labor for the first 4 years or 1,800 hours of any commercial grade or residential grade machine that we sell. And it seems wild. It's like, hey, how are you going to be able to manage that? But it's like, listen, I have the resources and you've put your trust in us. We want to make sure that your machine runs. And now more than ever, like, if you're not going to be able to, if things get a little weird or maybe it's not the right time to buy a piece of machine, like, the most important thing is that you take care of it. So, find the right dealer, find your person that can take care of this equipment, and you trust them with it. And, because outside of your employees, your equipment's going to be your biggest financial investment. And so, I would say don't let a big repair catch you off guard, and then all of a sudden you're forced into the situation to have to deal with some of these things that you can't control.
Yeah. Well said. Thanks. You really, Josh, you really brought some great insight to folks, I think, on many different levels here. Super valuable information. So, folks want to get a hold of you. What's a good way to get a hold of your company on Long Island?
Certainly appreciate the time, and powerequipmentplus1.com. Facebook, Instagram, all that other kind of jazz. I'm on LinkedIn, but frankly, call any one of the stores and hopefully they can figure out where I am that day, and they can get you my contact information. But I love chatting about the industry, love chatting about equipment, landscaping, whatever it might be.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the show. And you heard it right there from Josh Flynn. So you can catch him at powerequipmentplus1.com for any needs you have out on Long Island in New York. So thanks, Josh, for being on board today. Next episode, we've got a real estate broker coming on to chat with us about kind of the state of the real estate in the Northeast. So looking forward to that as well. So thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in to Blizzard and Bloom with Jay Rotinelli. We hope you feel inspired and empowered. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Join us next week for more insights and stories to help you bloom in your business journey.